Part 1. The Silent Desert Before the Man. In the quiet dust of central India, long before the world had ever heard the name Osho, a child wandered beneath a vast sky that seemed older than scripture. The village was small, barely more than a handful of mud houses resting against the low, wind-shaped hills of Madhya Pradesh. But for the child who walked through those sun-thickened afternoons, it was an entire universe, raw, unpolished, and filled with questions that no adult around him could answer. He had been born Chandra Mohan Jain, but names were temporary things to him. What mattered even then was not identity, but experience. Not the label, but the mystery beneath it. He had a way of staring at things, stones, trees, animals, shadows, longer than other children, as if trying to see a secret that hid beneath the ordinary skin of the world. And perhaps he already sensed what would later define his entire philosophy, that the world is layered, like an onion of consciousness, illusion on the outside, truth buried deep within. His childhood was marked not by toys or discipline, but by freedom. Complete, uninstructed, undirected freedom. His parents, busy and unsure how to contain this strange, independent child, often left him with his grandmother, an elderly woman whose heart was wide enough to give him something rare: space. She never told him what was right or wrong, what must be done or avoided, what counted as sin or virtue. She simply let him be, like a wild branch growing in its own unpredictable direction. And in that space, something ancient began to develop. He began to wonder, why do people obey rules they never agreed to? Why do grown men bow to idols who never speak? Why do people fear death with such trembling intensity, and yet live as if they have endless tomorrows? He watched people not with judgment, but with curiosity, a child observing the strange rituals of an adult world. And in these early years, the first flame of his philosophy took birth, not through books, but through seeing. He saw how minds were shaped. He saw how fear was taught. He saw how people forgot their own inner voice. Where others saw a normal village, he saw a theater of conditioning, people walking inside invisible cages, built not of iron, but of belief. And this is where the man who would become Osho began, not with holiness, not with sermons, not with scripture, but with a rebellion of seeing. The first encounter with death in every life. There is a moment when childhood ends, not smoothly, but with a crack, a fracture, a sudden collapse of innocence. For him, that moment arrived early. He was around 7 when his grandfather died. The house fell into a muffled panic, voices trembling, eyes swollen, hands pressed against foreheads. People cried in rehearsed patterns, as if their grief followed cultural choreography. And he, the child, stood beside the bed as they bathed the still body and prepared it for cremation. He didn't cry. He simply looked at the face that had become a mask, looked at the quietness that had settled like dust, looked at the hollowness where breath had once been. And then he asked the question that adults fear: where did he go? The room turned toward him, startled. No one had an answer. They had explanations, yes, religious ones, poetic ones, ritualistic ones, but no answer that touched reality. Someone said, "His soul has gone to heaven." Another murmured, "He has merged with God." A third whispered, "He will be reborn." But not one person could speak without uncertainty. The child walked away that day carrying a strange realization. No one knows anything, They only repeat what was repeated to them. This became the seed of his lifelong war against borrowed knowledge, against scriptures memorized but never lived, against beliefs inherited like old furniture, against philosophies learned secondhand. Death had whispered a secret to him, that the truth cannot be borrowed, it must be discovered. A child who refused to obey. In a country where obedience was worshipped and elders were unquestionable, he became a problem. Not because he was stubborn, but because he wanted truth, not tradition. If someone said, "Do this," he asked, "Why?" If they said, "Because it's our custom," he asked, "But does it make you more alive?" He refused meaningless rituals. He rejected empty prayers. He laughed at superstitions. He questioned every rule. And when rules were made of nothing but habit, he walked straight through them. One day, the village priest caught him sitting under a peepal tree, eyes closed, breathing softly, utterly still. The priest scolded him, "Don't sit under this tree at noon. A ghost lives here and he will enter your head." The child opened his eyes and smiled. "Then let him. I would like to meet him." The priest was shaken. Ghosts are powerful only to those who fear them. He feared nothing, not gods, not demons, not death. His grandmother later laughed, saying, "You will become either a great enlightened one or a great trouble to the world." She didn't realize he would become both: the hills, the rivers, the solitude. He wandered alone for hours, sometimes disappearing into the forests around the village, returning only at sunset. People thought he was lost. He wasn't. He was discovering his first teachers: the wind, the silence, the stillness of trees, the flowing water, the namelessness of existence. He once wrote later in life, "The river was my first master because it never tried to teach me. It simply flowed, and in its flowing, I learned everything." He would sit by the riverbank for hours, watching leaves float by, each leaf a universe, each ripple a reminder that life was movement. Movement without anxiety, without goal, without pressure. The village thought he was wasting time. He thought they were wasting life. The terrible beauty of aloneness. Most children fear being alone. He craved it. In solitude, he felt something opening inside him, an inner sky, a silent awareness. Years later, he would tell his disciples, "Solitude is the beginning of freedom, because it is the first moment you meet yourself." He didn't yet call it meditation. He simply called it being with myself. But what he was doing would later become the root of his entire teaching: the art of looking inward. He would stare at the night sky until the stars blurred into silver mist, until the boundaries between him and the vastness above him dissolved. Even as a child, he sensed the strange truth that later echoed through all his talks. There is no boundary between you and existence. You only imagine one. He grew up with no walls inside him, no dogma, no religion, no fixed morality, just a wild, open consciousness. This was the soil in which his future enlightenment would bloom. School, the battlefield. When he finally entered school, he collided with structure like fire against dry grass. Teachers demanded memorization. He demanded understanding. They demanded obedience. He demanded exploration. They demanded silence. He asked questions. Too many questions. He challenged mathematics teachers on logical inconsistencies. He challenged history teachers on the difference between fact and interpretation. He challenged religious teachers on the difference between belief and experience. He was punished again and again, made to stand outside the classroom, made to sit on the floor, made to write lines, made to apologize. He never apologized. Not once. Because for him, truth was worth every punishment. At the age of 9, in a dispute with a teacher, he asked, "If truth scares you, how will you teach children to be brave?" No one had an answer. The first brush with philosophy. Around this time, he discovered books, not light stories or poetry, but philosophy. Dense, heavy, mind-stretching philosophy. He devoured Plato, Aristotle, Heraclitus. He read Buddha, Mahavira, the Upanishads. He read Western skeptics and Indian mystics. He read epics, histories, scientific texts, logic manuals. He read with an intensity that frightened librarians. But the books did not make him a believer. They made him a questioner. He didn't accept anything blindly. He dismantled every argument, every doctrine, every belief system like a mechanic taking apart a machine. He learned something essential: that knowledge is not wisdom, that memory is not intelligence, that philosophy is not truth. Truth, he believed, was something that must be lived, breathed, experienced, not argued about. Later, he would say, "I read everything, not to collect knowledge, but to exhaust the mind. When the mind is exhausted, silence begins." Already, the seeds of his future meditation methods were forming inside him. A village boy touching the infinite. What separated him from others was not his intelligence, though his intelligence was sharp like lightning, cutting through illusions, but his awareness. Awareness that came not from discipline, but from freedom. Not from spiritual ambition, but from curiosity. Not from fear of punishment, but from love of truth. He would sit at night on the terrace, legs crossed, spine straight without effort, breathing slowly. The village slept, the dogs barked, the stars expanded like glowing wounds in the sky. And he would slip into an inner stillness so deep that even years later he would recall. I disappeared. Only silence remained. It was not enlightenment, but it was the doorway, the first seed of rebellion. By his late teens, he had already formed the central core of what would become his life's philosophy. Truth cannot be borrowed. Belief is the enemy of understanding. Religion must be personal, not inherited. The mind is a cage unless you learn how to use it. Freedom is the beginning of spirituality. Awareness is the only path. Life must be lived dangerously, passionately, consciously. He didn't learn these ideas from anyone. He discovered them in the lab of his own life. Where others walked with guided footsteps, he wandered without maps. Where others obeyed, he asked. Where others feared, he experimented. And this is why, even as he grew older, his spiritual rebellion did not weaken, it intensified. He didn't want to fit into the world. He wanted to understand it. And if the world was too small for the truth, then the world had to change, not the truth. Part 2. The Making of a Mystic Rebel. Osho's Awakening and Philosophical Foundations. There are turning points in human lives that arrive without warning. Moments when the sky seems to crack open, when existence whispers a secret that changes everything. For most people, these moments pass unnoticed, drowned out by noise, routine, and the heavy habits of thought. But for the young man who walked the dusty paths of Jabalpur with a silent storm inside him, life was moving toward something irreversible. He had grown older, taller, sharper, yet still carried the same unsettling presence he had as a child. Teachers feared him more now, not because he was rebellious, but because he was right too often. Friends admired him, but from a distance. His intensity was too bright, his awareness too penetrating. He made people feel naked, as though he could see the desires they hid, the fears they swallowed, the falsehoods they lived behind. He had become a young philosopher without trying, a meditator without method, a rebel without hostility, a seeker without a path. And then, one night in March, when he was 21, the seeking ended. The night of awakening. He described it many years later, sitting before thousands of seekers who hung on to every syllable. On that day, I died. And only after dying did I come to know what life truly is. It happened not in a temple, not in a cave, not through scripture or ritual, but under an old tree in a public garden. The most ordinary of locations for the most extraordinary of experiences. For weeks he had been feeling an inner pressure, not mental stress, but something deeper. A strange unraveling. The mind felt like a worn-out garment he could no longer wear. Thoughts ran like broken wheels. Sleep came like a thief, stealing nothing but leaving everything empty. He sensed a death approaching, not physical death, but the death of everything false. That evening, the air was warm and dense. He wandered to a small garden, sat beneath an ancient tree, and closed his eyes. He wasn't doing anything. No mantra, no posture, no breathing technique, just sitting. And then, suddenly, the world dissolved. The boundaries of the body evaporated. He could not tell where his hands were, where his legs ended, whether he was breathing or not. The air thickened until it felt like liquid light. The tree above him was no longer a tree. It was a living presence rising through him. The stars were not separate specks, but shimmering threads woven into his awareness. He wrote later, "A great silence descended, and in that silence I was not. Only existence remained. The separate self, the I, collapsed like a dried leaf. What remained was pure witnessing, pure being, no joy, no sorrow, just an immense stillness, a stillness so total that even the concept of silence was too loud for it. He sat for hours, unmoving, breathing in a rhythm that wasn't his. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked new, not because the world had changed, but because he had. There was no center inside anymore, no ego, no thinker, no doer, just a vast emptiness that felt more real than the flesh. He had awakened. The philosophy that emerged from emptiness. Most enlightened people speak of meditation, morality, renunciation, but he spoke of freedom. Not freedom as political liberty, not freedom as indulgence, but freedom as consciousness without conditioning. After that night, his entire philosophy crystallized in an instant, like lightning shaping the sky. 1. There is no God outside consciousness. The divine was not a person, not a father in heaven, not a ruler of the universe. The divine was this moment, lived without mind. Existence is not something you believe in, it is something you become. This was not atheism, nor theism. It was an uncompromising transcendence of both. 2. Truth comes only from experience, never from belief. He saw how people clung to scriptures because they were terrified of their inner emptiness. But truth wasn't a sentence, a commandment, a verse. Truth was a state of consciousness. Your belief in God is your way of avoiding God. 3. Freedom is the foundation of spiritual life. Every religion demanded obedience. He demanded rebellion. Every religion required followers. He asked people to become themselves. Every religion offered comfort. He offered liberation. 4. Awareness is the only true meditation. Meditation was not concentration, not chanting, not escaping. Meditation was the simple, silent witnessing of the present moment. One day he said, "Meditation is watching your thoughts as if they belong to someone else." This became the axis of his entire teaching. 5. Life must be lived in totality. He rejected the spiritual ideal of withdrawal. No caves, no celibacy, no renunciation. To him, the world was not a distraction. It was a classroom. Don't escape life. Enter it. Dive deeply. When you go all the way in, you come out transformed. This idea separated him forever from traditional gurus. The rebellious professor. After his awakening, he finished his education and became a professor of philosophy at Jabalpur University. It was the perfect setting for a mind like his, and a terrible place for institutions trying to maintain order. His lectures were electric. He didn't teach philosophy. He destroyed philosophy. He didn't explain the Upanishads. He questioned them. He didn't praise prophets. He dissected their motives. He didn't speak from memory. He spoke from direct experience. Students packed his classroom until there was standing room only. Many brought tape recorders. Some dropped out of other courses just to attend his lectures. Administrators grew nervous. He told students, "A philosopher is someone who thinks he knows. A mystic is someone who knows he does not know." He laughed at scholarly arrogance. He laughed at priests. He laughed at politicians. He even laughed at saints, calling them respectable prisoners. The more he laughed, the angrier the establishment became. Eventually, the university, unable to handle the chaos he caused, asked him to leave. He left without argument. The world outside was waiting for him. The dangerous beauty of his voice. Once he was free from the university, his real work began. He traveled across India giving talks, but these were not lectures in the traditional sense. They were like spiritual thunderstorms. Audiences sat spellbound, sometimes terrified, sometimes liberated, often bewildered. Because he did not give people what they wanted, he gave them what they needed. He tore apart scriptures with surgical precision. He exposed hypocrisy with a smile. He dismantled egos with the gentleness of a surgeon removing a tumor. People said, "No one has spoken like this in centuries." The religious leaders of India trembled. He was too clear, too fearless, too alive. His voice had the quality of a mirror, reflecting people's truth back to them. Listeners reported strange experiences. Some felt their minds go silent. Some cried without reason. Some laughed uncontrollably. Some fainted. Some ran away. His presence was like a flame, threshold of warmth, threshold of danger. The foundation of dynamic meditation. Osho saw something others didn't, that modern humans were too burdened, too repressed, too mentally noisy for traditional meditation. He said, "A modern man sitting silently is not meditating, he is boiling." He saw the psychological tension in people, the suppressed tears, suppressed rage, suppressed sexuality, suppressed desires. He realized meditation could not begin until this repression was released. So he created something no mystic had dared to create before. Dynamic meditation. It was explosive, chaotic, primal. It involved deep, chaotic breathing, emotional catharsis, wild, uncontrolled movements, primal screams, jumping, chanting, and finally, absolute stillness. At first, people thought he was crazy. Then they tried it and discovered transformation. The mind emptied. The imprisoned emotions broke out, and in the silent aftermath, a space appeared, a pure space where meditation could flourish. This method became the cornerstone of his teaching, the philosophy of total freedom. He was not a saint. He was not a monk. He had no interest in creating a spiritual army. His philosophy had one central demand: be free, free from religion, free from society, free from morality, free from fear, free from desire, free from ego, free from the past, free from the future. He was not against discipline, only against unconsciousness. He did not reject morality, only borrowed morality. He did not reject love, only possessive love. He did not reject desire, only desires that enslaved. His view was simple. Freedom is the ultimate value. Without it, nothing real is possible. Not love, not truth, not enlightenment. The sacredness of individuality. Unlike other monks and mystics who wanted followers, he wanted individuals. He refused to lead. He refused to dictate. He refused to be worshipped. He said, "If you follow me, you have misunderstood me." Yet paradoxically, people followed him more intensely than disciples follow a guru, because he did not want followers. His message was intoxicating. You are enough. You are capable. Truth is within you. No authority is needed. He taught that individuality was sacred, that no two people should ever become copies of each other, that enlightenment itself was unique to each person. His idea was revolutionary. Spirituality begins where imitation ends. The beginning of the Osho movement. As he spoke, meditated, and taught, more seekers arrived. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. He did not call it a religion. He did not call it a sect. He did not call it a school. He called it a movement of consciousness, a flowering, a rebellion, a transformation. People came from all over India to sit with him. Students, artists, businessmen, monks, housewives, wanderers, politicians, professors, and people who had lost everything. They came for many reasons. Some for healing, some for curiosity, some for spiritual adventure, some for freedom, some for answers, some for the silent energy that emanated from him, but all left with one gift, the beginning of their own awareness. He never told people what to believe. He told them to watch, to listen, to breathe, to observe, to let go. He became a strange and beautiful phenomenon in India, a mystic who refused to be mystical, a philosopher who refused to be philosophical, a guru who refused discipleship. And yet, he became one of the greatest spiritual teachers in modern history, the birth of a new identity. Around this time, people began calling him by new names. Acharya Rajneesh Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh the mystic. Later in America, he would become known as Osho. He chose the name because it meant the dissolving into the ocean. It was not a renaming, it was a description of his state. The storm ahead. He was famous now, too famous, and fame is dangerous for a man who wants to change the structure of human consciousness. Religious leaders condemned him, politicians feared him, traditional gurus resented him, but he didn't care. He walked into the storm with the same calmness he carried as a child, staring into the river. Because for him, truth was worth any opposition. Freedom was worth any cost. Awareness was worth any sacrifice. The stage was set, the foundation laid, the voice awakened, the rebel ready. The next chapters of his life would shake the world, ignite controversies that would last decades, and reveal the dark and luminous sides of humanity. But before the conflict came the flowering, the full articulation of one of the most astonishing spiritual philosophies our world has ever seen. He was no longer a seeker, he was the storm. Part 3. Freedom as the First and Last Religion. Osho's Defiance of Tradition. There is a moment in the life of every awakened being when their voice stops being merely personal and becomes something larger, something that rises like a tidal wave and moves through thousands of other lives. For Osho, that moment came when he began openly speaking about spiritual freedom, not as a luxury, not as a philosophy, but as the very essence of human existence. Freedom was not a political slogan for him, not an ideology, not a psychological indulgence. Freedom was his religion, not the freedom to do whatever one wants. That, he said, is mere childishness. But the freedom to be what one truly is. The freedom from conditioning, from past voices whispered into the mind, from inherited fear, from social guilt, from religious obligation. While the world taught obedience, discipline, self-denial, and submission, he taught something radically opposite. Let your life be a celebration, not a sacrifice. This was shocking. This was heretical. This was dangerous. And this was the birth of one of the most revolutionary spiritual philosophies of the modern age. His war against borrowed belief, Osho traveled across India, giving talks that were unlike anything people had ever heard. He did not speak with the heaviness of a scholar or the rigidity of a priest. His words floated like silk but cut like a diamond. They dismantled centuries of tradition with unnerving clarity. Temples, scriptures, priests, rituals, nothing was beyond his critique. He would tell audiences, a borrowed truth is more dangerous than a lie. A lie can be questioned, but a borrowed truth becomes your prison. In India, where religion seeped into every breath, into every meal, into every greeting, his words were like a blaze lit through dry grass. He said, "Do not repeat the Vedas. Discover your own truth. Do not worship Buddha. Become a Buddha. Do not follow Krishna. Dance your own dance." People were startled. Some were thrilled. Some were terrified. Some were outraged. Thousands of years of tradition were being dismantled by a man who spoke with the quiet intensity of a poet and the brutal accuracy of a surgeon. But to him, tradition was not sacred. It was a weight, not a treasure. It was a chain. He said, "Religion becomes real only when it is personal. A religion borrowed from others is not religion. It is conditioning." This became the foundation of everything he would later teach. He rejected all religions without becoming an atheist. Most people believed there were only two positions: believe in God, do not believe in God. Osho said both were wrong. To him, belief itself, whether in God or in no God, was the problem. He said, "A believer and an atheist are two sides of the same coin. Both have closed their doors. Both refuse to explore. Both claim to know." Instead, he offered a third path, the path of the seeker, the path of the existential explorer, the path of the living question. He did not ask people to deny God. He asked them to deny secondhand ideas of God. He asked them to look into the deepest silence of their being and discover whether divinity existed as an experience, not a concept. To him, God was not a father figure. God was not a judge. God was not a creator. God was not an object of worship. God was a presence experienced in deep consciousness, a flowering of awareness, a fragrance of meditation, something that cannot be believed, only realized. His critique of organized religion: he said the world had known only two kinds of religions. 1. Religions of belonging, social religion. 2. Religions of being, existential religion. Most of humanity belonged to religion type 1. People were Hindus because they were born into Hindu families. People were Christians because they were born into Christian families. People were Muslims because they were born into Muslim families. This, he said, was not religion. It was geography. Being born in a kitchen does not make you a cook. Being born in a temple does not make you religious. He called organized religion the greatest political institution in history, an institution more powerful than any empire because it ruled not land, not armies, but minds. He exposed the psychology behind it. Religion created fear to control people. Religion created guilt to weaken people. Religion created sin to shame people. Religion created afterlife fantasies to manipulate people. Religion created authority figures who demanded obedience. He said, "A fearful humanity cannot be free, and without freedom, nothing spiritual is possible." He believed fear was the glue that held religions together, and he wanted to dissolve that glue completely. Why he said, "Never worship me." Most gurus live for devotion. Most leaders hunger for followers. Most authorities seek disciples. He rejected all of it. His message was, "I am not here to give you dependence. I am here to give you wings." He regularly told his audience, "Don't surrender your intelligence. Don't bow down before me. Don't turn me into an authority. Question everything I say." He once said, "The real guru kills the disciple so that the being can be born." But people loved him even more for this. They respected him because he didn't demand respect. They listened to him because he didn't demand anyone listen. They trusted him because he never asked for trust. This was the paradox of Osho. The more he rejected discipleship, the more disciples appeared. He spoke with the freedom of a man who had nothing to protect. Osho didn't belong to any tradition, any ideology, any lineage. He spoke from a place beyond them all. So he could say anything, absolutely anything. He could praise something one day and criticize it the next, because truth was not a fixed system to him. It was alive, fluid, breathing, constantly updating itself. He would say, "Truth is not a dogma, it is a dance." This made some people uncomfortable. They wanted stability, predictability, a clear doctrine, but he offered none. Because he knew, the moment truth is crystallized into doctrine, it becomes dead. Destroying the false first, Osho saw that before people could discover who they were, they had to unlearn who they were not. So he made it his mission to dismantle illusions. Illusions of morality, illusions of duty, illusions of sin, illusions of spirituality, illusions of identity, illusions of culture, illusions of ego. He didn't tear illusions from people. He made people see how silly the illusions were, and then they fell away on their own. His clarity was disarming. He could dismantle centuries of conditioning with a single sentence. He once told a conservative man, "Your morality has not made you moral, it has made you afraid." To a monk, he said, "Your celibacy is just a fear of women. A fear is never holy." To a sadhu who renounced the world, he said, "You didn't renounce the world, you ran away from life." To a priest, he said, "You are not serving God. You are serving your own ego clothed in holiness." No one was safe from the precision of his insight. The birth of his new religious vision. As he traveled and spoke, he began planting the seeds of a new understanding, something the world had not seen before. He called it Zorba the Buddha. This was his vision of a new human being. Zorba the Greek, rooted in the earth, sensual, celebrating, laughing, alive. Gautam Buddha, rooted in the sky, silent, meditative, aware, enlightened. He said, "Humanity has suffered because we separated these two. We made the body sinful and the soul holy. I want to bring them together." This became one of the pillars of his philosophy. A spirituality that was not denying, not repressing, not ascetic, not joyless, a spirituality that could dance, sing, laugh, cry, love, celebrate, a spirituality that was whole. Why the world feared him, people fear what they cannot categorize. Was he a philosopher? Yes, but too experiential to be just that. A mystic? Yes, but too rebellious. A guru? Yes, but he rejected devotion. A psychologist? Yes, but he transcended the mind. A revolutionary? Yes, but his revolution was silent and internal. A poet? Yes, but his poetry was spoken, not written. A sage? Yes, but too modern, too relaxed, too unpredictable. He escaped every box, every label, every frame. He frightened the world because he was uncontrollable. And when someone cannot be controlled, society tries to silence them. Breaking morality. Apart, to reveal consciousness. One of the most scandalous aspects of his teaching was his behavior toward morality. He attacked moral rules relentlessly, not because he wanted immorality, but because he knew morality was a poor substitute for consciousness. He said, "A moral man is not necessarily good. He is simply afraid." He offered a different approach. Don't force goodness. Don't imitate goodness. Don't pretend to be good. Don't follow rules blindly. Instead, become conscious, and goodness will follow you like a shadow. To him, morality without awareness was hypocrisy. Awareness without morality was impossible. This was one of his most profound psychological insights. His compassionate fire Osho dismantled beliefs with gentleness. He challenged ideas with laughter. He exposed hypocrisies without cruelty. He was fiery, yes, but his fire was compassionate. He never destroyed a person, only the lies that suffocated them. He said, "The truth that hurts you also heals you. The lie that comforts you also kills you." He never demanded change. He simply made people see the truth so clearly that change became inevitable. The foundation of his life work. By the early 1970s, his teaching had crystallized into a triad. 1. Meditation awareness, witnessing, inner silence. 2. Love, not desire, not attachment, but the pure, overflowing joy of being. 3. Freedom from conditioning, from society, from guilt, from fear. Together, these formed the spiritual architecture of everything he would later build. He said, "Meditation gives you roots. Love gives you wings. Freedom gives you the open sky." This was the beginning. The roots had been planted. The tree of his teaching was growing. The next stage would take him beyond India, to the West, where his message stirred forces far more powerful than he imagined. The storm was coming. But first, there would be the flowering, a golden period where his community expanded, his discourse deepened, and his vision grew bolder, clearer, more luminous. Part 4. Dynamic Meditation and the science of inner catharsis, there is a moment in modern history when meditation quietly broke away from its ancient, serene image and transformed into something wild, explosive, chaotic, and utterly contemporary. That moment belonged to Osho, and it happened because he understood something that almost no other mystic had seen. The modern mind is too burdened, too cluttered, too wounded, too noisy for traditional meditation. He saw people sitting cross-legged in lotus posture, trying desperately to quiet their thoughts. He saw their faces tighten behind forced serenity. He saw their bodies stiffen from suppressed emotions. He saw their minds boiling under the surface even as they tried to imitate peace. He would say, "If you sit silently, nothing will happen. First, your madness must be thrown out." This was the moment when spiritual practice changed forever. The psychological landscape of the modern human Osho wasn't looking at people the way gurus looked at their disciples. He looked at them like a scientist, a psychologist, and a mystic simultaneously. He saw the inner architecture of their emotional lives. Decades of suppressed anger, unexpressed tears, unspoken desires, repressed sexual energy, trauma buried under polite behavior, fear disguised as discipline, loneliness hidden behind social smiles, a constant mental hum of anxiety and an exhaustion that meditation couldn't penetrate. He understood the central issue. People were choking on their unexpressed emotions. Their minds were not empty, they were overflowing. Their hearts were not calm, they were armored. Their bodies were not relaxed, they were prisons of tension. For such people, asking them to sit silently was like asking a volcano not to erupt. Silence cannot come to a mind that is screaming inside. The birth of dynamic meditation. One morning, after months of observing people struggle with traditional methods, Osho declared, "The old techniques do not work anymore. Man has changed. Meditation must change." And like a flash of lightning across a clear sky, he created something entirely new: dynamic meditation. It shocked India. It shocked the spiritual world. It shocked everyone who believed meditation must be gentle, quiet, controlled. Because this method wasn't calm. It wasn't still. It wasn't polite. It was primal. It was fierce. It was volcanic. It was cathartic. It began with chaos and ended in silence. Stage 1. Chaotic breathing. The technique begins with 10 minutes of wild, rapid, unpatterned breathing. Not deep yogic breathing. Not slow pranayama. Not controlled inhalation. No. This breathing is intentionally chaotic, irregular, rapid, intense, shocking to the nervous system. It shakes the mind loose from its usual patterns. It disrupts the body's habitual rhythms. Osho explained, "Chaos is needed because your mind is a structure of control. Only chaos can break it." People felt their bodies fill with energy. The mind fought back, then surrendered. The breathing pierced through numbness, through apathy, through fear. The breath became a hammer, breaking the walls of repression. And then came the second stage, the most explosive of all. Stage 2. Catharsis, the emotional earthquake. For 10 minutes, meditators were told to do whatever the body wanted. Scream, cry, howl, laugh, shake, jump, hit pillows, collapse, roll, throw out, anger, release, grief, dance, roar, tremble. Nothing was forbidden. Nothing was holy. Nothing was shameful. This was the moment when everything repressed, everything held back for decades, came out like a storm. Osho said, "You have carried your tears for too long. Let them fall. You have swallowed your anger for too long. Vomit it out. In this stage, people discovered something terrifying and liberating. The body remembers everything, every insult, every heartbreak, every scream you swallowed, every desire you killed, every grief you didn't express, every fear you hid behind a smile. It was all stored in the muscles, in the breath, in the nerves, in the spine. This stage was a cleansing of the unconscious, a purging of emotional toxins, a psychological storm that left behind a strange emptiness. And into that emptiness came the next stage. Stage 3, the mantra of fire. Hu, hu, hu! For 10 minutes, meditators jumped with arms raised, shouting a single syllable, hu, 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 hu! It was not a chant. It was an energetic blow to the center of consciousness. This ancient Sufi sound struck the sex center, the root of life force. It hammered against the area where emotional energy gets stuck, releasing it upward through the spine. Osho described it. Each hu is a sword cut in the mind. Each jump is a hammer breaking the past. This stage was physical, intense, tribal. People often emerged drenched in sweat, heart exploding, mind empty. And then, the fourth stage arrived. Stage 4, the miracle of sudden silence. After 30 minutes of emotional storms and energetic eruptions, suddenly, stop, freeze, stillness, no movement, no cough, no scratch, no adjustment, no shifting. Like a statue, eyes closed, body frozen, breath settling, and in that instant, thousands of meditators around the world experienced something that ancient monks achieved only after decades: pure, luminous silence. No thoughts, no desires, no memories, no identity. Just a vast, clear sky of awareness. The chaos had burned away the noise. The catharsis had emptied the emotional basement. The jumping had awakened the inner fire. What remained was the watcher, the pure witnessing consciousness. This was the moment dynamic meditation was designed for. Stage 5, celebration. The dance of the new human. The final stage was 10 minutes of celebration. Dancing, laughing, smiling, flowing, moving with grace, because Osho believed meditation is not complete without celebration. Silence alone creates monks. Silence with celebration creates whole human beings. He wanted enlightened people who could dance, sing, love, laugh, play, work, create. People who lived life fully, not in fear. Dynamic meditation was not just a technique, it was a revolution. Why this method works. The science behind the madness. Osho understood emotions deeply, long before modern psychology caught up. He said, "You cannot think your way into silence. You must release your way into silence." Here's why his method is powerful. 1. Chaotic breathing breaks psychological patterns. It disrupts the mind's repetitive loops. 2. Catharsis releases emotional repression. Modern humans store emotional pain in their bodies. Catharsis releases it. 3. Jumping with hu awakens dormant energy. It shocks the dormant life force awake. 4. Sudden stillness turns the chaos into silence. Stillness after activity is deeper than forced stillness. 5. Celebration integrates the transformation. Joy seals the healing. He understood trauma, repression, tension, and emotional blockages with an accuracy that psychologists are only beginning to acknowledge today. Dynamic meditation became a bridge between the ancient and the modern, between psychology and mysticism, between body and soul. The global explosion of his method. By the mid-1970s, dynamic meditation had spread like wildfire. meditation centers in India, ashrams in Europe, communes in America, workshops in Japan, therapy groups in South America, experimental communities in Australia. People from every culture tried it. Some cried for the first time in 20 years. Some laughed uncontrollably. Some screamed out decades of unspoken pain. Some discovered their inner voice. Some felt reborn. Even professional therapists began adapting aspects of dynamic meditation into their work. It was a global emotional release, a psychological earthquake. And behind it stood a single man with an unbroken vision. Turn human beings into conscious beings. Not just a technique, a philosophy of healing. Dynamic meditation was the centerpiece, but Osho developed more than 200 meditative methods. But all of them carried the same deeper message. 1. The body is not the enemy. It is the doorway. 2. Emotions are not obstacles. They are suppressed energies waiting to be released. 3. The mind is not the master. It is a tool, dangerous only when unconscious. 4. Meditation is not concentration. It is awareness. 5. Healing does not begin with control. It begins with honesty. He told people to watch their breath, their thoughts, their sensations, their desires, their dreams, not to suppress anything, just to watch. Because awareness transforms. The Western world arrives. As Osho's teachings spread, Western seekers began arriving in India. Psychologists, artists, musicians, students, business leaders, rebels, scientists, wanderers, young people searching for meaning, older people searching for rebirth. They wore orange robes. They meditated all day. They danced in ecstatic abandon. They cried. They released. They laughed. They healed. And many walked away saying, "This man changed my life more in 1 month than all my years of therapy." Dynamic meditation had unlocked something universal, primal, and transformative. It was no longer a technique. It had become a movement. The trembling of old structures. Traditional mystics were horrified. How can meditation be noisy? How can spiritual people scream? How can seekers dance? How can enlightenment include laughter? But Osho didn't care. His goal was simple. I want to create a new human being, someone whole, alive, awakened. And the old structures trembled not because he broke rules, but because he gave people direct access to their inner truth. No scripture needed, no discipline needed, no authority needed, no priest needed. This threatened every institution that fed on human guilt and fear. He was dismantling centuries of repression, and he was doing it with laughter, music, dance, and meditation. The world had never seen anything like him. Meditation as a path to freedom. At the core of Osho's method is a simple insight. Enlightenment is not something you achieve. It is something you uncover. Dynamic meditation doesn't give enlightenment. It removes the barriers that block it. He said, "Meditation is not something you do. It is something that happens when you stop doing." And his method was a way of burning out everything that prevents that happening. A new chapter begins. Dynamic meditation marked the beginning of Osho's global influence. It was the spark that lit an international spiritual revival. But it was only the beginning. Soon, he would move from India to America, and the world would witness one of the most dramatic, controversial, revolutionary experiments in spiritual history. Rajneeshpuram. But before the commune, before Oregon, before the storm, there was a deeper layer of Osho's teaching that shaped everything. His radical philosophy of love, sex, and human intimacy. Part 5. Love, Sex, and the Sacred Body. Osho's most controversial philosophy. There are few subjects that expose the human psyche as nakedly as sex. It is the root of our birth, the fire of our youth, the confusion of our relationships, the ache in our loneliness, the shadow behind our morality, the longing behind our prayers. Yet for thousands of years, spiritual teachers treated sexuality as something shameful, something to be denied, suppressed, or violently controlled. Osho walked into this ancient field of guilt and silence with a clarity that startled the world. He did not whisper. He did not soften his words. He did not hide behind symbolic language. He simply said, "Sex is sacred, and until it is understood, you will never understand yourself." This one sentence shook the foundation of every religious institution on earth. Because for the first time, a mystic was saying the opposite of what priests had thundered for centuries. While the world judged sexuality as sin, he saw it as a door, a beginning, a seed that, if nurtured with awareness, could blossom into the highest spirituality. Why he spoke about sex at all, he did not speak about sex because he was obsessed with it. He spoke about it because the world was obsessed with suppressing it. He once said, "I talk about sex because people are filled with fear about it. I talk about sex to destroy the fear, not to feed the desire." He understood a simple truth. What we repress becomes our prison. Repression distorts the mind. Repression poisons love. Repression makes people hypocritical. Repression destroys innocence. Repression replaces understanding with fear. Every religion had taught people that sex was dangerous. He taught them that ignorance was dangerous, not sex. His goal was always the same: to bring awareness into every corner of human existence. Sex was just the most forgotten corner. Sex is energy, not morality. Osho's understanding of sexuality began with one simple insight. Sex is the basic energy of life. Every flower is born from sex. Every human being is born from sex. Every animal, every creature, every seed in the earth, all arise from this fundamental life force. He said, denying sexual energy is like denying gravity. How can something so natural be evil? How can something that creates life be condemned as sin? His answer was simple. It is not sex that is problematic. It is unconsciousness. Unconscious sex becomes addiction, attachment, manipulation, trauma, lust, violence, obsession, possessiveness, anxiety, guilt. But conscious sex becomes intimacy, vulnerability, surrender, connection, celebration, trust, meditation, transcendence, love. The difference is not in the act. The difference is in the awareness. The two wings of a human being, love and meditation. Osho's vision of human growth rested on two foundations. 1. Love. 2. Meditation. Love without meditation becomes addiction. Meditation without love becomes isolation. Only together can a human being be whole. He said, "Love is one wing, meditation is the other. Without both, you will not fly." Sex was simply the seed of love, a beginning, not an end. If experienced consciously, sex could open the heart. And when the heart opened, meditation followed naturally, because in deep intimacy, the ego melts, time melts, boundaries melt. In those moments, people experience a taste of the same dissolution they encounter in deep meditation. Sex, for Osho, was not the ultimate, but it was the doorway. Why the world fears sexuality, Osho saw sexuality clearly, without shame, without moral judgment. He saw why religions were obsessed with controlling it. 1. Sexuality is powerful. People in touch with their sexual energy cannot be easily controlled. 2. Sexuality makes people alive. Alive people question authority. 3. Sexuality awakens individuality. Moral systems require obedience. 4. Sexuality dissolves guilt. Without guilt, priests lose their power. 5. Sexuality creates freedom. Freedom threatens every hierarchy. He said, "A sexually satisfied person is dangerous for society because such a person is not easily enslaved." So religions demonized sex, turning it into fear. Society molded sex into suppression. Culture twisted it into shame. Families hid it in silence. The result? Entire generations growing up with emotional scars inherited from centuries of repression. Osho wanted to break the chain, not by encouraging indulgence, but by encouraging awareness. Tantra, the forgotten science. When he spoke about sexuality, many assumed he was promoting indulgence. But he wasn't teaching hedonism. He was reviving an ancient spiritual science, Tantra. Tantra sees sexual energy not as something to be rejected, but refined, transformed, elevated, like coal becoming diamond, like water becoming steam, like seed becoming flower. He explained, Tantra says, accept totally. Through acceptance, transformation happens. He taught that sex could become a meditation, not through technique, not through discipline, not through performance, but through presence, deep presence, silent presence, loving presence. If two people could be fully present with each other, without ambition, without greed, without fear, without past, without future, then sex became a doorway to the same silence found in deep meditation. This was dangerous knowledge, too powerful for dogmatic religions, too liberating for hierarchical systems. Osho wasn't preaching immorality. He was teaching innocence. The 3 layers of sexual energy. Osho broke down sexual energy into 3 layers. 1. The physical layer, instinct. At this level, sex is mechanical, biological, animalistic. Most people never rise above this layer. 2. The emotional layer, love. If energy rises to the heart, sex becomes intimacy, connection, tenderness. 3. The spiritual layer, transcendence. If it rises further, sex becomes meditation, silence, union with existence. The same energy that pulls people down can also lift them up, if transformed. This was the heart of his message. Sex is the seed. Spirituality is the flower. You cannot destroy the seed without killing the flower. But you can transform the seed into something divine. Why his views created firestorms. No other mystic had spoken so openly about sex. No religious leader had dared to call it sacred. No philosopher had connected it to enlightenment. The reaction was predictable. Newspapers attacked him, governments feared him, religious leaders condemned him, moralists demonized him, academics ridiculed him, politicians spoke against him, even some seekers were disturbed. He became the most controversial spiritual figure of his time. Yet the controversy had nothing to do with his actual teaching. The world heard only the word sex. They never heard the words that followed. Love, consciousness, transformation, awareness, transcendence. It was a selective hearing born out of fear, but Osho never stopped. He continued speaking because he knew a humanity ashamed of its own sexuality can never be free. Beyond sex, toward pure love. Eventually, people began to understand that his message wasn't about sex, it was about going beyond sex. He told his disciples, if you fully live your sexuality, it will disappear, and in its place, love will arise. He taught, sex is the seed, love is the flower, Compassion is the fragrance. Enlightenment is the sky in which the flower blooms. He wasn't promoting indulgence. He was promoting transformation. He wasn't saying be sexual. He was saying start where you are, end where you can become. The wound of repression, the wound of indulgence. He saw that humans were trapped between two extremes. One, repression, the old religious ideal to kill the body, control desire, destroy sexuality. This led to guilt, fear, neurosis, anger, violence, perversion, hypocrisy, psychological fragmentation. 2, indulgence, the modern reaction, to pursue sex without depth, without intimacy, without awareness. This led to addiction, emptiness, boredom, emotional numbness, spiritual dryness, shallow relationships. Osho offered a third path. 3, awareness, a path where sexuality was neither repressed nor indulged, but understood, neither killed nor worshipped, but transcended through loving consciousness. The body as a temple. One of the most revolutionary things he said was, "Your body is your temple. Treat it with reverence." For centuries, religions taught the opposite. The body is sinful, the body is dirty, the body is temporary, the body is an obstacle, the body must be denied. He flipped the teaching. Without loving the body, you cannot touch the soul. He saw the body as a beautiful, delicate, intelligent organism, a miracle of existence, a temple where awareness could awaken. When people loved their bodies, they relaxed. When they relaxed, they opened. When they opened, love flowed. When love flowed, meditation became effortless. This was his understanding. The body is the doorway, not the obstacle. The sacredness of intimacy. Osho saw intimacy not as a biological act, but as a spiritual encounter. He said, when two people meet without masks, without fear, without expectations, without past, without future, they touch the divine. He taught lovers to breathe together, gaze softly, slow down, listen, accept, be fully present, be gentle, let go of ego, let energy flow, move from sex to love, from love to meditation, and from meditation to prayer. Prayer not in the religious sense, but in the sense of gratitude for love's existence. Spirituality without shame. Osho restored innocence to the most wounded part of the human psyche. He said, "There is nothing to be ashamed of. You were born of love." Shame was the root of spiritual disease. Awareness was the cure. In freeing people from the fear of their own sexuality, he freed them from the root of their psychological imprisonment. Beyond the body, beyond sex. Eventually, he said, if you grow in meditation, one day you will transcend sex, not by force, but by fulfillment. This was the climax of his vision. Sex, love, meditation, consciousness, enlightenment. He wanted people to rise beyond sexuality, not by cutting it off, but by transcending it naturally. Just like a child outgrows toys, a meditator outgrows sexuality. Not out of repression, but out of expansion. Not out of fear, but out of wholeness. Not out of moral force, but out of spiritual maturity. The reaction of the world. As his teaching on sexuality spread, the world reacted violently. Because sexuality is the foundation of tradition, family structure, religious architecture, social control, moral philosophy, psychological conditioning. By freeing people sexually, he was freeing them spiritually, and institutions cannot survive free individuals. This was one of the many reasons he was attacked, criticized, banned, and condemned. But despite the storm, his message continued to spread because it was true, because people were suffering, because repression had failed. because indulgence had failed, and because deep down, humans longed for a path where body and soul were not enemies. He gave them that path, a path where sexuality becomes understanding, understanding becomes love, love becomes meditation, meditation becomes transformation, transformation becomes freedom. This was the breakthrough, the point of no return. And now, his philosophy was fully formed, ripe, alive, luminous, radical. The next stage of his life would take this philosophy from India to the most unlikely place on earth, the American desert, where he would attempt the boldest spiritual experiment of the 20th century, and where the greatest storm of his life would unfold. Part 6. The Psychology of Ego. Why human beings live in illusion. There is a strange and silent architect inside every human life, an invisible craftsman who builds walls around the heart, who shapes our fears, who whispers our desires, who decides what we cling to and what we run from. That architect is the ego. For Osho, ego was not just a concept or a psychological term. It was the deepest illusion in human existence, the root cause of almost every form of suffering. He said, "Ego is your greatest imaginary friend and your greatest real enemy." Most spiritual teachers talk about ego as if it is simply pride. But for Osho, ego was much larger, much darker, much more complex. The ego was the false self, the mask we wear, the identity we defend, the image we project, the voice that says I even when no such entity exists. He understood ego so deeply that he could describe it like an old friend, a friend who lies, manipulates, seduces, and at the same time protects. And his understanding of ego became one of the central pillars of his entire philosophy. The ego is a fiction built from many voices. According to Osho, the ego is not born with the child. A newborn baby has no sense of I. A newborn does not say, "This is my mother. This is my body. I am hungry." There is hunger, yes, but no I that possesses the hunger. There is crying, but no identity behind the cry. Everything is flow. Everything is natural. Everything is without division. The ego develops later. It is a construction, a collage of opinions, expectations, teachings, fears, desires, and memories. Osho said, "Your ego is a crowd, not a person. It contains your parents' expectations, your teacher's commands, society's rules, religious conditioning, childhood wounds, fears absorbed from others, ideals imposed upon you, comparisons made by others, ambitions planted into you. It is a patchwork of external forces stitched together inside your mind. So when you say I, it is not you speaking. It is the sum total of all that others have put in you." This was his first shocking revelation. The ego is not your identity. It is your imprisonment. The ego lives in the past, never the present. He explained that ego cannot exist in the present moment. The present is too alive, too fresh, too real. Ego survives only through memories, imaginations, projections, achievements, comparisons, reputation. He said, "Ego is a story, and the present is not a story. That is why ego cannot live there. Look at your thoughts," he said. "You will see they belong either to the past you cherish or resent, or the future you fear or desire. The present is silent. The ego is noisy. The present is clear. The ego is clouded. The present is immediate. The ego is distant. To live in the present is to expose the ego. And that is why ego avoids the present at all costs. Ego needs comparison. Otherwise, it dies. Osho saw that ego can never exist alone. It needs others, constantly, not for companionship, but for measurement. He said, "Ego cannot exist without the other, because I is possible only if you exist." So the ego compares. Am I richer than him? Am I more attractive than her? Am I smarter than others? Am I more spiritual than others? Am I right and they wrong? Am I better? Am I enough? This constant measuring becomes an addiction. He said, "Comparison is the food of the ego. Stop comparing, and the ego dies." This is why society pushes competition relentlessly. Better grades, better job, better spouse, better house, better reputation, better body, better life. Competition keeps the ego alive and keeps consciousness asleep. The ego is a defense mechanism. Whenever we feel vulnerable, the ego steps in like a bodyguard. Don't show weakness. Don't cry. Don't apologize. Don't let them see your fear. Don't let them win. Don't surrender. But this protection comes at a price. He said, "To protect yourself, you have built a wall, but the wall protects you from life itself. Ego protects us from pain, but it also prevents love from entering. Ego shields us from humiliation, but it also prevents intimacy. Ego guards our image, but it blocks transformation." Osho taught that life is not meant to be lived inside walls. To be alive, one must be open, vulnerable, transparent. The ego fears transparency because truth dissolves it. The ego feeds on fear. Fear is the nourishment of ego. He said, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of death, fear of loneliness, fear of judgment, fear of losing identity, fear of losing control. Whenever you feel fear, the ego grows stronger. Whenever you feel love, the ego shrinks. He would tell his disciples, "Ego is afraid because it knows it is false. Love fears nothing because it knows it is real." This is why love feels like a threat to the ego. Because in moments of deep love, identity dissolves. You forget yourself. You become a flow, not a boundary. Ego cannot tolerate such moments, and so the ego sabotages love. How ego sabotages love. Osho saw intimacy with the clarity of a surgeon. He said most relationships fail not because people don't love each other, but because their egos do. The ego wants control, possession, certainty, security, dominance. But love wants vulnerability, surrender, openness, fluidity, trust. Ego says, don't let them hurt you. Don't let them see the real you. Don't depend on anyone. Don't let go. Love says, let go. Dissolve. Be open. Be honest. Be present. These two voices are irreconcilable. So in most relationships, ego wins because people are more afraid of losing their identity than losing their love. Osho said, when love knocks, the ego trembles. And when the ego trembles, love disappears. The ego plays 3 games. Osho identified 3 major strategies the ego uses. 1. The game of superiority. I am better than others. I am special. I am chosen. This creates arrogance, dominance, spiritual pride, political ambition, moral judgment. 2. The game of inferiority. I am worthless. I am not good enough. I am smaller than others. This creates depression, submission, fear, addiction to approval, self-hatred. He said, the inferior ego and the superior ego are the same. They are both forms of ego. 3. The game of identity. I am a doctor. I am a Hindu. I am a Christian. I am a mother. I am a good person. These labels become prisons because the moment you believe a label, you stop exploring who you really are. The ego cannot be destroyed by force. Many spiritual traditions teach the destruction of ego. Osho rejected this. He said, "You cannot kill something that does not exist. The ego is not a thing, it is a shadow, and shadows disappear not by fighting, but by lighting a lamp." He explained, "You cannot fight the ego, you cannot suppress it, you cannot overpower it, you cannot escape from it. All of these attempts only strengthen the ego, because the very effort to defeat ego comes from ego itself. You can only understand the ego, witness it, observe it, see it clearly, and in that clarity, it dissolves on its own. Awareness is the antidote. The ego cannot survive awareness, because awareness brings you into the present moment, and ego exists only in the past and future." Osho taught a very simple meditation. Whenever you catch the ego in action, stop. Look at it. Witness it. Don't judge. Don't condemn. Just observe. This observation creates distance. The ego becomes an object. You become the watcher. And the watcher is real. The ego is not. As this witnessing grows, the ego loses its power. He said, "Awareness is like fire. It burns the ego to ashes. The ego is afraid of death. The ego knows it is temporary. Therefore, it is obsessed with survival. This creates ambition, achievement, addiction, competition, greed, fame, hunger, political power, the craving to leave a legacy." He said, "The ego wants immortality because it knows it will die. But the true self, the witnessing consciousness, never fears death, because awareness knows it is eternal. This is why enlightened people become free from death, not because they escape the body, but because they transcend the illusion of ego. Dropping the ego opens the door to real spirituality. Osho insisted that real spirituality begins only when ego fades. He said, "The ego is the cloud. Awareness is the sky. Letting go of ego is not loss, it is freedom. Without ego, love becomes easier, meditation becomes natural, silence becomes deep presence, becomes effortless, compassion becomes spontaneous, joy arises from within, suffering loses its grip, the world becomes luminous. And ultimately, the barrier between you and existence collapses." He said, "When the ego disappears, God appears, not as a person, but as a presence." This presence was what his entire teaching pointed toward. A presence that cannot be captured in scripture, cannot be defined by belief, cannot be imprisoned by dogma. It can only be lived. The ego and the coming storm. Osho understood ego not just in individuals, but in societies, religions, cultures, and governments. He saw collective egos forming: national ego, religious ego, political ego, racial ego, ideological ego. These collective egos were far more dangerous than individual ones. They created wars, oppression, fanaticism, violence. And Osho was about to challenge some of the largest collective egos in the world. His understanding of ego was about to be tested in the real world, in a showdown that would shake governments, disturb nations, and create one of the most dramatic conflicts in modern spiritual history. The next chapter of his life would take him from the jungles of India to the deserts of Oregon, USA, where he attempted something never before seen: a living laboratory for human consciousness. A commune based entirely on meditation, freedom, love, awareness, and egoless living. But the world's ego would not allow such an experiment to exist peacefully. Part 7: Death, Nothingness, and the Eternal. Osho's Metaphysics of the Soul. Death was always close to Osho, not as fear, not as an enemy, but as a silent companion. Even as a child, he would sit beside burning funeral pyres, watching the flames consume bodies while villagers wept or prayed beside him. He would not cry. He would observe. Something in him knew that death held a secret that life was hiding. Later in life, he said, "Death is not the end. Death is the greatest lie ever taught. But the lie is not that death doesn't happen. The lie is that you die." For Osho, understanding death was not a philosophical luxury. It was the gateway to enlightenment itself. He believed, death reveals what life cannot. Death is the master that teaches truth without words. Death is the mirror in which the ego dissolves. Death is the only certainty, and therefore the greatest opportunity. This was the core of his metaphysics. To know life, you must first understand death. And to understand death, you must look directly into it. Death as the doorway, not the destination. Osho said, "The body dies, the mind dies, but something remains that is not born and cannot die." He did not describe this something in traditional terms. He did not call it soul in the Christian sense, nor Atman in the Hindu sense, nor Anatman in the Buddhist sense. He refused to give it a name because naming creates limitation. Instead, he described it through experience, a silent witnessing, a center of awareness, a sky-like presence, an observing consciousness, a pure seeing without a seer. In this state of witnessing, he said, it becomes clear. Death happens only to what is not you. The body is born. The body dies. The mind is formed. The mind dissolves. But the witness, the pure consciousness beyond form, remains untouched. He said, "You are not the waves. You are the ocean beneath. Waves rise and fall, but the ocean remains." This realization changes everything. The beauty of dying consciously. Most people die in fear, confusion, attachment, regret. They resist death because they resist life. Osho taught that one who has lived fully has no fear of dying. If life has been a joy, death becomes its ultimate climax. He explained that consciousness can remain awake even while the body is dying. In such a moment, a person experiences the separation of the witness from the physical body, the dissolving of memories, the dropping of identity, the melting of all boundaries. Many of his disciples reported that being near him during the death of a fellow seeker felt like witnessing a sacred event, a kind of inner sunrise. He said, "If you can die consciously, you will know in that moment that you have never been the body." To die consciously is to die before death. Reincarnation. Reinterpreted people asked him, "Is reincarnation real?" He laughed softly. Reincarnation is a word. The reality behind it is simply continuity of consciousness. He did not teach reincarnation the way religions present it, as a reward-punishment game controlled by cosmic law. He rejected the moralistic interpretation. He said, the body dies. The mind continues for some time. The consciousness, if still tethered to desires or identifications, finds another body. He called it a movement of unfinished energy. Just as a seed seeks soil, your unresolved desires seek another womb. This is not a soul traveling, but a momentum, an imprint, a continuity of longing. But if one becomes awakened, if one realizes the witness, if one transcends ego and desire, then reincarnation ends. Not because a god decrees it, but because there is nothing left to continue. He said, enlightenment is freedom from the cycle, not because you escape it, but because you no longer belong to the world of desires. Heaven and hell demystified. When asked if heaven or hell exists, he smiled. Heaven and hell are not places, they are psychological states. Heaven, he said, is what happens when your consciousness becomes spacious. Hell is what happens when your consciousness becomes contracted. He described heaven as calmness, clarity, peace, awareness, and love. Hell as fear, anger, guilt, repression, and ego. The transition from hell to heaven happens within a heartbeat. He said, if you can be aware even for a single breath, you have tasted heaven. To him, heaven was just the fragrance of awareness. Hell was the heaviness of unconsciousness. The nothingness at the center of everything. One of his most revolutionary insights was this: at the center of your being, there is nothing. Not emptiness in the negative sense, but emptiness as pure space, as silence, openness, stillness. This emptiness is not a void, it is a presence, a living silence. He described it like this: it has no boundaries, it cannot be described, it cannot be captured, it has no birth, it has no death, it is eternal, but not in time. It is infinite, but not in space. He often used the image of the hollow bamboo. A hollow bamboo can become a flute. An empty mind can become God's song. This emptiness is what religions call God, what mystics call enlightenment, what poets call the beloved. But he insisted, it is not outside you, it is your core. The fear of nothingness. Why do people fear silence? Why do people avoid aloneness? Why do they drown themselves in activity, noise, stimulation, distraction? Because Osho said, if you come close to nothingness, the ego trembles, for it knows it cannot survive there. The ego is a soap bubble. Nothingness is the needle. This is why people avoid meditation, people fear death, people cling to relationships, people hold bitterly to opinions, people stay busy, people chase achievements, people numb themselves with entertainment, because every moment of genuine silence threatens the ego's existence. But he told people, don't fear nothingness. It is your real home. Once you embrace it, you will discover it is not death. It is liberation. Life and death are not opposites. Most people think life and death oppose each other. But Osho taught that life and death are a single process. He said, life and death are two sides of one coin. Life is the journey. Death is the homecoming. Just as inhalation and exhalation are two aspects of breathing, life and death are two aspects of being. Without death, life cannot be renewed. Without death, the stale cannot fall away. Without death, consciousness cannot evolve. Death, he said, is a cleansing of old energies, old identities, old memories, old wounds. He said, death is a beginning, not an end. Like sunset is the beginning of night, and sunrise is already on its way. The art of dying before death. Osho taught a profound meditation. Die before you die. This meant, let go of the ego, let go of the past, let go of attachments, let go of fear, let go of identity. He guided people to lie down as if they were corpses, to witness the body as a dead shell. Slowly, slowly, the fear of death evaporated and a deeper truth emerged. You are the watcher, not the body. This meditation became central to his teaching on courage. Because once you are unafraid of death, you are unafraid of life. Death as a celebration. He shocked the world by saying, when I die, celebrate. There should be dancing, laughter, music. Because he knew he was not the body, he was not the mind, he was pure awareness. He wanted his death to be a teaching, a demonstration that death is not tragedy, but transformation. Years later, when he died, his disciples did exactly as he said. No mourning, no weeping, no sorrow, only quiet celebration, a rare moment in modern spiritual history. His ashes were placed under a marble slab with the inscription, "Osho, never born, never died, only visited this planet between 1931 and 1990. This was not poetry. This was his metaphysics. The body is born, the body dies. But consciousness, it neither comes nor goes." His view on God, Osho, did not accept the traditional idea of God. He said, "God is not a person. God is the presence you feel when you are utterly silent." To him, God was not separate from existence. God was not a creator. God was creativity itself. God was not a judge. God was pure intelligence. God was not something to worship. God was something to experience. He redefined divinity. God is the emptiness within you that is full of everything. The eternal moment. His metaphysics had one central revelation. Only this moment exists. The past is a memory. The future is imagination. The present is the only real eternity. When you enter the present moment fully, you enter eternity. Time dissolves. Desire dissolves. Fear dissolves. Ego dissolves. And what remains is pure being. This pure being is what he called enlightenment, nirvana, samadhi, moksha, liberation, God realization, awakening. Different words, same experience. The silence behind all words. Although he spoke millions of words, Osho said, "My true teaching is not in my words, but in my silence." People who sat with him often reported a strange experience. Thoughts slowen, breath deepening, heart opening, energy shift in a deep peace, descending a sense of infinite space. This was the real transmission. Not the concepts, not the philosophy, not the metaphysics, but the silence behind his presence. He was teaching people how to touch that silence within themselves. That silence was eternal. That silence was beyond birth and death. That silence was home, toward the greatest experiment of his life. With this understanding of death, this freedom from fear, this clarity about the eternal, Osho was ready to create something unprecedented, a living experiment in conscious community, a society built not on fear but on awareness. This experiment would take him from the dusty meditation halls of Pune to a vast 64,000-acre desert in Oregon, USA. It would become Rajneeshpuram, a city of meditation that shook America to its roots. But the same ego he had trained his disciples to transcend was waiting in the outside world. Fierce, political, territorial, violent. The world was not ready for a society without ego. And that conflict would become one of the wildest chapters in spiritual history. Part 8. Enlightenment as a lived experience. The state beyond mind. Enlightenment is perhaps the most misunderstood word in the human vocabulary. People imagine halos, divine auras, levitation, miracles, the sudden transformation into something superhuman. But for Osho, enlightenment was not a dramatic event. It was not a supernatural achievement. It was not something that happened to a chosen few. It was not something confined to monks in Himalayan caves. He said, "Enlightenment is your natural state. You have simply forgotten it. You have forgotten because the mind is too noisy. You have forgotten because the ego is too heavy. You have forgotten because society has filled you with borrowed dreams and second-hand desires." His entire mission was simple: to remind human beings of what they already are. Enlightenment, for him, was not the peak of some distant mountain. It was the ground beneath your feet, hidden by your own shadow. Enlightenment is not an attainment, it is a realization. He said, "You cannot become enlightened. You can only discover that you already are." This was the most revolutionary aspect of his teaching. Most spiritual traditions treat enlightenment as a goal, a reward, an achievement, the culmination of effort, the result of sacrifice, something to be earned. But Osho said enlightenment cannot be achieved by effort, because effort belongs to the ego. And the ego is precisely what dissolves in enlightenment. He compared enlightenment to waking up in the morning. You open your eyes and the world is suddenly there. It did not come from effort. It did not arrive through struggle. It was always present. He said, "Enlightenment is the moment you realize that the one who was seeking never existed." The state of no mind. The core of enlightenment is what he called no mind. No mind is not the absence of thought. It is the absence of identification with thought. Thoughts may appear, but they pass like clouds. There is no attachment, no ownership, no clinging. He said, "In no mind, thoughts come and go, just as birds fly across the sky without leaving any footprints. The sky is not affected. In no mind, thinking becomes a tool instead of a master. Silence becomes your natural climate, awareness becomes constant attention, becomes effortless. The heart opens, the senses become sharper, emotions become transparent, fear disappears, desire becomes play instead of compulsion. The past loses its grip, the future loses its shadow. It is a state of clarity, like a clear lake reflecting the stars. This is why enlightened people radiate such calmness. They are not fighting themselves anymore." What happens in enlightenment? Osho described the experience in simple, poetic language. One day the mind stops, and you are there, naked, silent, aware. He said enlightenment feels like a deep relaxation, a profound letting go, a melting of boundaries, floating in an infinite ocean, a sense of being home, a clarity without thought, a light without a source, a love without an object, a freedom without opposition. But most of all, it feels completely natural. He said, "It is not an achievement. It is a return." The paradox of enlightenment. He often spoke about the paradox. You cannot seek enlightenment because seeking is the barrier. You cannot force enlightenment because effort is the obstacle. You cannot desire enlightenment because desire is the darkness. He said, "Stop trying, just be." But humans are addicted to effort, to goals, to improvement. This is why enlightenment feels distant, because people look for it the wrong way. The greatest obstacle, the spiritual ego. The moment a person begins meditation, a new danger appears, the spiritual ego. This ego is more subtle, more slippery, more cunning. It says, "I am more spiritual than others. I am closer to enlightenment. I am special. I am chosen. I am holy. I am pure." Osho laughed at this ego more than anything else. He said, "The spiritual ego is the final trick of the mind. Beware, it is the last barrier." Some people become monks, shave their heads, wear robes, chant mantras, memorize scriptures, practice austere discipline. Yet inside, the ego grows, now decorated with holy language. He called such people egoists disguised as saints. He insisted that enlightenment requires nothing except awareness. No rituals, no renunciation, no moralistic struggle, no spiritual performance, just presence. Why meditation leads to enlightenment? Meditation, for Osho, was not a technique. It was a way of being. He defined it. Meditation is simple awareness. Not concentration, not focus, not discipline, not withdrawal, just simple witnessing. When you sit silently, with eyes closed, watching breath, thoughts, feelings, sensations, you begin to see something extraordinary. You are not your thoughts, you are the watcher. The mind becomes an object, and you become the subject. This gap, the distance between you and your thoughts, is the beginning of awakening. Slowly, slowly, the watcher becomes stronger. Thoughts weaken. The past loses its grip. The future loses its pull. Eventually, the watcher remains when thoughts disappear completely. This pure witnessing is enlightenment. Enlightenment in daily life. Enlightenment was not, for him, a dramatic event. It was a subtle shift that changed the texture of everyday life. He described an enlightened person. They move slowly. They speak softly. They listen deeply. They do not rush. They are not reactive. They do not judge. They are not burdened by past wounds. They are not anxious about the future. They find beauty in ordinary moments. They laugh easily. They love without attachment. They are present in everything they do. Their heart is full. Their mind is empty. Their awareness is total. He said, "Enlightenment is the ordinary lived with extraordinary awareness. It is not about escaping life. It is about entering life fully." He rejected the idea of renunciation. Unlike traditional gurus, Osho did not believe in running away from the world. He said, "Why renounce? The world is beautiful. Be in the world, but do not let the world be in you." He wanted enlightened people who lived in cities, worked ordinary jobs, had families, loved, laughed, created, danced, celebrated. He did not want caves and monasteries filled with half-awake hermits. He wanted a living spirituality, a dynamic enlightenment, a celebration of existence. This made him different from every other teacher of his time. He made enlightenment accessible instead of exclusive. Satori and Samadhi, the two steps. He described two stages. One, Satori, the glimpse, a moment of silence, a brief stillness, a sudden clarity, a flash of insight, a taste of no mind. Satori comes and goes. Two, Samadhi, the state, a permanent shift, a continuous presence, a deep transformation, a constant witnessing, a merger with existence. Samadhi is irreversible. He taught that many seekers experience Satori without knowing it. In nature, during love, in music, in dance, during deep relaxation, in meditation. But unless they understand it, it disappears. Meditation makes the glimpse a permanent light. The enlightened person and the world enlightenment does not make life easier. It does not guarantee comfort. It does not erase difficulties, but it changes the relationship to difficulty. He said, "An enlightened person still suffers, but does not become the suffering. Suffering becomes momentary, not personal. Anger comes and goes, but the watcher remains untouched. Sadness appears, but it is just a passing cloud. Joy arises, but it too is transient. Nothing sticks, nothing binds, nothing defines. Freedom is no longer a concept. It is the very texture of being. The infinite compassion of an enlightened being. People often said they felt loved by Osho in a way they had never felt before, not because he was affectionate, but because he was empty. He explained, only an empty person can love, because only emptiness has no expectation. He did not judge. He did not condemn. He did not ask anyone to be different. He accepted people as they were, and that acceptance transformed them. This acceptance was not emotional. It was existential. People did not feel his love. They felt his presence. His presence was a mirror in which others saw their own truth. The enlightened person and death for an enlightened being. Death is a return. It is not an enemy. It is not a tragedy. It is not a failure. It is simply a movement of energy. He said, "The enlightened person does not die because there is no one left to die." When he spoke about his own death, there was no fear, no sadness, no hesitation. He said, "One day this body will stop, but I will remain in your silence." This was not poetry, it was fact. Enlightenment reveals that you were never the body to begin with. Why enlightenment frightened the world? His teaching made enlightenment available to everyone. This made political powers uncomfortable. This made religious institutions terrified. This made social structures defensive. Because if people discovered their inner freedom, governments would lose control, priests would lose authority, traditions would lose their power, families would lose their grip, society would lose its structure. He was not just teaching meditation, he was teaching rebellion at the deepest level, a rebellion against inner slavery, a rebellion through awareness, a rebellion through truth. The enlightened person cannot be manipulated, and the world cannot tolerate unmanipulable people. The stage was set with his teaching on enlightenment complete. Osho was ready for the next leap. He had transformed thousands in India, but he wanted to build a new world, a conscious society, a human experiment beyond ego, a commune where enlightenment could be lived collectively. This dream would take him out of India and into the heart of America. It would become one of the most fascinating, controversial, extraordinary chapters in spiritual history, where a mystic tried to build a new world and collided with the old one. Part 9. Osho versus Society. Why the World Fears Enlightened People. It is a strange paradox of history that societies admire saints long after they are dead, but crucify them while they are alive. Enlightened people are celebrated in textbooks, worshipped in temples, carved into statues, quoted in sermons, but only after time has softened their rebellion, after the fire in their words has cooled into myth, after their presence can no longer threaten the structures that shape the world. Osho understood this dynamic deeply. He said, "I do not fit into this world. The world has created a pattern, and I am not part of that pattern." This is why society resisted him so fiercely, because enlightened people are not just peaceful. They are dangerous in a quiet, transformative way. Not dangerous to individuals, but dangerous to the collective illusions that hold society together. Osho was not against the world, but the world felt he was against it, because his clarity exposed all the lies it depended upon. Why society cannot tolerate a free individual. The free individual is the greatest threat to any organized system. A free individual does not obey blindly. A free individual is not frightened. A free individual is not manipulated by guilt. A free individual does not follow tradition without understanding. A free individual does not sacrifice truth for comfort. A free individual does not believe in boundaries, nations, or religions. A free individual loves, but cannot be possessed. Osho said, "Society depends on your slavery. A free person is unpredictable, and the system cannot use him. A free human being does not become a soldier, does not become a fanatic, does not become a conformist, does not become a machine, does not become a robot repeating inherited beliefs. Such a person is dangerous. Not because they harm others, but because they inspire others to awaken. Freedom spreads like wildfire. and nothing terrifies power structures more than awakened, fearless human beings. This was the beginning of Osho's conflict with society. He exposed the lies of religion. Every religion carries two layers: the teachings of enlightened masters, the institutions built by followers after the masters died. The masters were rebels. The institutions became prisons. Jesus was a rebel, but churches became authoritarian. Buddha was a rebel, but monasteries became rigid. Krishna danced, but his followers fought wars. Lao Tzu spoke of fluidity, but Taoist priests created strict rules. Osho pointed to this hypocrisy. Priests are the real enemies of religion because they replace truth with dogma. This infuriated religious authorities. They were used to blind followers, not rebellious thinkers. People who listened to Osho began questioning rituals, breaking free from fear, challenging tradition. This was enough for religious institutions to consider him dangerous. He challenged political power. Politicians thrive on fear. Fear of the enemy, fear of insecurity, fear of losing identity, fear of the unknown. A person who has no fear cannot be governed by fear. Osho said, "A fearless person is beyond politics." His followers were becoming fearless. They were leaving behind social conditioning, economic ambition, political allegiance, party loyalties, nationalistic pride. This frightened politicians, especially when thousands of young, educated, financially stable people began abandoning conventional life to join Osho's commune. Governments saw it as a cult, a threat, an ideological mutation, a potential revolution. But Osho's revolution was silent, internal, psychological, and that made it even more dangerous to the outside world. He attacked social conditioning. Society depends on conditioning. Good versus bad, right versus wrong, duty versus desire, sin versus virtue, morality versus immorality, tradition versus rebellion. These binaries maintain order. But Osho said, all conditioning is imprisonment. He encouraged people to unlearn, to drop borrowed beliefs, to reject guilt, to dismantle internal authority, to free themselves from cultural hypnosis. This was radical. Because if people unlearned everything society taught them, the family structure would change, the education system would lose its power, religious institutions would collapse, political systems would weaken, traditional values would crumble, cultural hierarchies would dissolve. This level of unlearning was the real threat. Not Osho himself, but the freedom he triggered in others. He celebrated the body, society worships shame. Osho treated the body as sacred. This contradicted Hindu asceticism, Christian guilt, Islamic modesty, Jain renunciation, Buddhist monasticism. Every major tradition had taught, suppress the body, control desire. Osho said the opposite. The body is a temple, celebrate it. Society could forgive a philosopher for being rebellious, but it could never forgive a mystic for freeing people from bodily shame. Sexual freedom was the final straw, because society is built upon sexual repression. Without repression, marriage systems would change, gender roles would crumble, obedience would decline, morality would lose authority, and society cannot function without morality, even if that morality is hypocritical. Osho exposed the hypocrisy, and that terrified the world. He encouraged community based on awareness. Osho wanted to create communes, groups of people living together in meditation, in love, in awareness. Historically, communes have always threatened mainstream society. They break the family unit. They form new economic structures. They create alternative education. They challenge political authority. They redefine social identity. When thousands of young people flocked to Osho's ashram in Pune, the government grew anxious. They saw it as a parallel society, a society without traditional marriage, without national identity, without religious allegiance, without hierarchy, a society where men and women lived freely, work was chosen, not forced, wealth was shared, meditation was central, joy was normal, freedom was the rule. Such a community is a spiritual revolution, and revolutions frighten systems. Why enlightened people always meet resistance. Osho explained that society reacts to enlightened beings because they mirror humanity's unconsciousness. He said, "People hate me because I show them their masks, and without masks, they feel naked." Enlightened people expose the falseness of relationships, the emptiness of ambition, the arrogance of morality, the hypocrisy of religions, the stupidity of politics, the futility of wars. They do not expose these things directly. Their presence exposes them. That presence is a threat. This is why Socrates was poisoned, Jesus was crucified, Mansur al-Hallaj was executed, Buddha was exiled by kings, Kabir was hated by Hindus and Muslims alike. Lao Tzu escaped to the mountains. Osho was part of the same lineage, the lineage of those who shine too brightly for the world to tolerate. His presence was too much for the world. People who sat with Osho often said, "I feel seen. I feel exposed. I feel naked. I feel free. I feel terrified and peaceful simultaneously." His presence carried a strange combination: comfort plus challenge, love plus fire, silence plus rebellion. He was not a gentle teacher. He was not a comforting guru. He was not a moral preacher. He was a mirror, a burning mirror. He reflected everything: your beauty, your wounds, your ego, your longing, your emptiness, your potential. People wanted truth, but only the truth that was convenient. He gave them truth that was whole, and that kind of truth is always dangerous. He did not belong to any side. Another reason society struggled with him was that he did not fit into any category. He was too rebellious for traditional religious people, too mystical for scientists, too scientific for mystics, too free for politicians, too political for spiritualists, too modern for the East, too Eastern for the West, too erotic for moralists, too moral for hedonists. He escaped every label, and society hates unlabeled people. Labels make control possible. Labels create predictability. Labels create boundaries. Osho lived without boundaries. This alone made him dangerous to every system. Enlightenment challenges the unconscious majority. Osho explained that 99% of human behavior is unconscious. People follow biological instincts, social conditioning, emotional patterns, psychological compulsions, cultural expectations, without questioning. Enlightenment disrupts this sleep. He said, "The enlightened man is awake in a world of sleepwalkers." Sleepwalkers do not like being awakened, because awakening means responsibility, freedom, authenticity, awareness, choice, courage, vulnerability. Most people prefer comfort over awakening. Thus, the awakened one becomes a disturbance. The beginning of the American chapter. By the late 1970s, Osho's following had grown so large that Pune could no longer contain them. Thousands wanted to join his commune. Hundreds of therapists, scientists, artists, and thinkers wanted to bring his vision into practical reality. A self-sustaining, meditative society based on awareness, freedom, love, and creativity. His Indian ashram was overflowing. He retreated into silence for years. His health deteriorated from the strain. Eventually, his commune decided they needed land, vast land, land where they could build a new world. They searched globally, and finally, they found it. A vast, barren desert in the middle of Oregon, USA. A land that would become known as Rajneeshpuram, the city of consciousness that the world tried to destroy. Part 10. The Rajneeshpuram Experiment. Utopia, Collapse, and Human Darkness. There are moments in history when a dream becomes so large that the world around it begins to tremble. Rajneeshpuram was one such dream. It was not just a commune, not just a settlement, not just a spiritual center. It was a living experiment, a vision of a new kind of humanity, one that had never existed before. Osho wanted to build a city not based on fear, not based on obedience, not based on conformity, but based on awareness. He said, "I want to create a living laboratory for the birth of a new man, not a monk, not a follower, not a believer. A conscious, free, joyful, intelligent, rebellious human being." But the world does not easily allow such experiments. And when thousands gathered around a mystic who taught freedom instead of obedience, love instead of marriage, meditation instead of morality, inner truth instead of tradition, the storm began forming long before anyone arrived in America. Why America? Why a desert? Why so far away? In the late 1970s, Osho had withdrawn into silence. His body was fragile. His health was failing. The crowds in Pune had grown too large, too intense, too chaotic. His disciples understood that if the movement was to grow, they needed a place vast enough for a new world, a new culture, to be created. India was becoming hostile. Politicians feared his influence, religious leaders despised his sexual openness. Media portrayed him as dangerous. Conservative groups protested taxes and legal pressures grew. Visas for foreigners were being blocked. America, on the other hand, had something India did not. Vast, uninhabited land, legal freedom, a frontier spirit, no ancient religious structures, space for experimentation. His disciples searched for land in almost every state. Finally, in the remote high desert of Oregon, they found it, 64,000 acres of barren, windswept nothingness. Dry earth, empty hills, harsh weather, no trees, no water except one struggling creek. A place where no one would imagine building a city. But Osho saw potential where others saw desolation. He said, "Even a desert can bloom if consciousness is the gardener." And so the purchase was made. The birth of Rajneeshpuram. The land was named Rajneeshpuram, the place of Rajneesh, though Osho himself lived in silence during its construction, communicating only through his energy. What happened next was unprecedented. Thousands of seekers from all over the world, engineers, architects, musicians, doctors, scientists, craftsmen, artists, gathered in this barren desert and within months began building. Roads, reservoirs, power systems, houses, gardens, meditation halls, communal dining areas, a fire department, a dam, a shopping mall, a school, a farm, a sewage system, airports for private planes, and even a small town infrastructure. Volunteers worked 16 hours a day, not out of obligation, but out of love for the vision. Osho once said, "Love makes the impossible possible." Rajneeshpuram was that impossibility made real. The red desert began turning green. Vegetables grew, lakes formed, flowers bloomed. People danced in the streets. Meditation happened every morning. Celebration happened every night. For the first time, a spiritual leader was not creating a religion. He was creating a civilization. The commune was unlike anything on earth. What made Rajneeshpuram extraordinary was not the buildings, but the atmosphere. People lived together without marriage requirements, caste, religion, race, identity, hierarchy, competition, traditional family structures, gender roles. Children belonged to the community, not just biological parents. Work was meditation. Play was meditation. Dance was meditation. Love was meditation. Everywhere people laughed, cried, healed, meditated, and transformed. Visitors said, "It feels like the future." But critics said, "It feels too free," and freedom, when lived so openly, becomes a mirror that threatens the world around it. The outside world reacts. The nearby conservative town of Antelope, population around 40, was the first to feel the impact. Suddenly, thousands of people in orange clothes and malas were arriving in their quiet, rural world. The townspeople saw strange foreigners, unconventional lifestyles, meditation, dance, women living independently, men with long hair, people kissing in public, communal living, laughter, celebration, Eastern philosophy, and a presence they could not categorize. Fear grew. Fear turned to suspicion. Suspicion turned to anger. Anger turned to organization. They believed the commune was a cult, a threat, an invasion, a takeover, a danger to American values. Local politicians joined the opposition. State leaders stepped in. Media began escalating the story. A mystic who simply meditated in silence became the center of a national controversy, and controversy turned into conflict. The conflict of vision versus fear Osho was teaching. Freedom, joy, creativity, meditation, love without possession, community without hierarchy, but the outside world saw danger, immorality, brainwashing, foreign influence, rebellion, loss of control, fear, not understanding, became the basis of reaction. Osho said, "People fear what they cannot understand, and they destroy what they fear." This summed up everything that would follow. Sheila enters the picture. During this period, Osho continued his 3-year silence. He spoke to no one except through written notes. Into this vacuum stepped his secretary, a fierce, ambitious, charismatic woman named Ma Anand Sheila. She became the spokesperson, strategist, organizer, protector, and gatekeeper. Sheila had 2 qualities. She was deeply devoted to Osho. She would do anything to protect him. This combination became explosive. She saw the outside world attacking the commune. She saw politicians plotting. She saw conservative Christians mobilizing. She believed she had to fight back, and she fought with aggression. Her methods were not Osho's methods. Osho believed in awareness, love, meditation, patience. Sheila believed in strategy, power, confrontation, and sometimes manipulation. The clash between these 2 energies planted the seeds of tragedy. Tensions escalate. The commune grew rapidly. Within 2 years, over 7,000 people lived there and 20,000 visited annually. This level of growth frightened Oregon officials. The government launched zoning lawsuits, immigration investigations, tax inquiries, land use challenges, political campaigns against the commune. The commune responded with legal battles, rallies, political organizing, defending their rights. As the conflict grew, Sheila became increasingly combative. She called politicians bigots, called critics fascists, and used harsh language in press conferences. This gave the media exactly what they wanted: a villain. And the story turned darker. The The turning point, the Beatles of spirituality. By 1983, Osho broke his silence. He began speaking publicly again, and people realized something crucial. He did not know what Srila had been doing. He had been in silence, meditating, isolated. He did not direct political actions. He did not oversee operations. He did not participate in strategies. He spoke only of meditation. But by the time he emerged, the damage had already begun. Srila's aggressive leadership and the commune's rapid expansion made them appear threatening to the American government. And once the government targets you, it rarely lets go. The fall begins, internal conflicts erupted. Some commune members began questioning Srila's decisions. Rumors spread of her controlling behavior. Osho, freshly out of silence, began asking questions. Why military-style security? Why hostility with neighbors? Why aggressive political actions? Why secret operations? Why was access to him restricted? Srila grew nervous. She left the commune abruptly with her group of loyal administrators. Only after her departure did the full truth emerge. Misuse of commune funds, illegal surveillance attempts to influence elections, accusations of violence, poisoning incidents, plots carried out without Osho's knowledge. Osho condemned everything publicly. He said, "She betrayed the commune. She betrayed me. She betrayed herself." But by then, the US government saw an opportunity. The commune was vulnerable, its leadership fractured, its public image damaged. The attack began. The arrest and the end Osho was arrested on immigration charges, not for crimes he committed, but as a method to dismantle the commune. He said, "When they cannot understand a man, they jail him." He was moved across jails in 12 states, a psychological tactic known as diesel therapy, designed to break inmates mentally. But he remained silent, peaceful, radiant. Years later, many prison workers said his presence felt calming, unsettling, mysterious. After intense legal pressure, he accepted a negotiated departure from the United States to prevent further harm to his people. Rajneeshpuram collapsed soon after. Buildings were abandoned, land was seized, the dream dissolved. The commune had lasted only 4 years, but in those 4 years, it became one of the most extraordinary social experiments in human history. Why Rajneeshpuram failed Osho explained the failure simply. It was not destroyed by the government. It was destroyed by ego. Not his, not the commune's, but the ego of individuals who took power into their own hands and lost awareness. He said, "Power corrupts, even in a commune." And also, people brought their unconsciousness into the commune. The commune reflected their unconsciousness. Ego, fear, misunderstanding. These forces destroyed the dream more than any government could. The achievement still remains. Even though Rajneeshpuram ended, what it achieved was unprecedented. Strangers from around the world lived together in harmony. Meditation became a daily rhythm, creativity exploded, therapy and spirituality merged. The desert bloomed, the body was celebrated. Children grew without repression, freedom was lived, not preached, thousands healed, thousands awakened. For a moment, the world glimpsed what humanity could be. And that glimpse, even though short-lived, was enough to leave a mark on history. Osho's reflection on Rajneeshpuram, he said, "Rajneeshpuram was a dream. Dreams do not last, but they show what is possible. And I do not regret anything. Even failures are experiences." And finally, the commune failed, but the consciousness we created will live forever. To him, Rajneeshpuram was not a tragedy, but a teaching, a reminder that consciousness can create heaven, but unconsciousness can destroy it in a moment. A new chapter begins. After leaving America, Osho returned to India. His body was fragile, but his voice became sharper, clearer, more luminous. He no longer wanted to build a city. He wanted to build individuals. His teaching reached its most profound depth in his final years. Now began the era of pure wisdom. No politics, no communes, no conflict. Only meditation, silence, and truth. This leads us to the next phase. Osho's unique interpretations of Zen, Taoism, Tantra, and Sufism, the heart of his universal spirituality. Part 11. Zen, Tao, Tantra, Sufism. Osho's interpretation of world wisdom traditions. In his final years, Osho became something extraordinary, a bridge between ancient mystical traditions and the modern restless mind. He was not a scholar, not a historian, not a theologian, but a mystic whose insights flowed directly from lived experience. He once said, "I have never studied the world's religions. I have lived them." He didn't analyze Zen. He embodied its emptiness. He didn't interpret Taoism. He moved with its flow. He didn't decode Tantra. He lived its acceptance. He didn't explain Sufism. He danced in its ecstasy. His discourses on these traditions are among the most celebrated in modern spiritual literature, not because they are academically perfect, but because they make the ancient alive again. He made the mystical simple, the abstract tangible, the silent audible, the distant intimate. When he spoke of these paths, it felt as though the original masters were speaking through him. Why he taught so many traditions. Most spiritual teachers stay within a single tradition. Osho taught over 300, from Zen to Sufism, from Taoism to Tantra, from the Upanishads to the Gospels, from Heraclitus to Buddha. Why? He explained. There are as many paths to truth as there are human beings. What helps one person may hinder another. What opens one heart may close another. He said spirituality should be flexible, creative, individualized, experiential, joyful. A religion should not be a prison. It should be a garden with many flowers. Osho taught not to adopt a tradition, but to use it as a mirror to see yourself clearly. 1. Osho and Zen. The path of pure awareness. If there was any tradition Osho loved most deeply, it was Zen. He said, "Zen is the distilled essence of all religions. Nothing is left except pure enlightenment. Zen is simple, impossibly simple. No scripture, no God, no rituals, no prayer, no future, no past. Only this moment, this breath, this silence, this awareness." Osho often said Zen was not a religion at all, but a method of awakening. Why Zen resonated with him, Zen emphasizes emptiness, meditation, direct experience, spontaneity, humor, aliveness. These qualities mirrored Osho's own being. Zen masters laugh for no reason, shout to awaken students, destroy scriptures, break all conceptual boundaries, reject philosophical debate. Embrace the immediacy of life, celebrate the ordinary. Osho loved this spirit. He said, "Zen is the only tradition that dares to say enlightenment is as ordinary as drinking tea." He interpreted Zen as a rebellion against mind, a dance of awareness, a celebration of existence, a return to innocence. He brought Zen into modern language, modern psychology, modern life. He took ancient paradoxes and made them accessible. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. He explained, "Nothing changes, except you. And that changes everything. Osho's Zen stories. Osho had a gift for storytelling. He could take a simple Zen anecdote and weave it into a living transmission. When he told a Zen story, he was not explaining. He was inviting listeners into the same shock, the same awakening, the same gap in the mind that the original story created. People said it was as if he took you inside the mind of a Zen monk. Through him, Zen came alive again, not as history, but as a living flame. 2. Osho and Taoism, the path of effortless flow. Taoism is the poetry of existence. While Zen is a sword, Taoism is a river. Osho said, "Tao is the most beautiful teaching ever given to humanity. Tao means the way, the natural rhythm of existence. Clouds, mountains, rivers, winds, trees, stars, all move without effort." Osho explained Tao as letting go of control, relaxing into life, living without struggle, allowing oneself to flow, embracing spontaneity, trusting existence. He said, "Life is not a problem to be solved. Life is a mystery to be lived." This is the heartbeat of Tao. Lao Tzu, the silent master. Osho adored Lao Tzu, the mythical founder of Taoism. Lao Tzu wrote, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." Osho laughed and said, "Lao Tzu never met me." Taoism appealed to Osho because it rejected all austerities, all forced morality, all unnatural discipline. Lao Tzu taught, "Walk slowly, speak minimally, intervene, rarely be like water, stay soft, remain humble, let things be disappear into the background." Osho said, "Lao Tzu is my heart." He interpreted Taoism as the art of becoming ordinary, not special, not holy, not enlightened, just utterly natural. He would tell his disciples, "The river flows by itself. Let your life be a river." 3. Osho and Tantra. The path of Yes Tantra was perhaps the most misunderstood tradition Osho revived. Most of the world thought Tantra was about sexual indulgence. But Osho clarified, Tantra is not about sex. Tantra is about transforming every energy into awareness. Tantra does not say renounce. Tantra says accept. Accept everything, accept the body, accept desires, accept emotions, accept life as it is, and then transform it. He said, "What you reject becomes your prison. What you accept becomes your freedom." Tantra teaches no repression, no moral judgment, no guilt, no running away, because acceptance contains the seed of transformation, the alchemy of energy. He explained that human energy is like fire. If suppressed, it becomes poison. If indulged, it becomes addiction. If transformed, it becomes light. Tantra is the science of transformation. He described it as taking darkness and turning it into understanding, taking fear and turning it into courage, taking sexuality and turning it into compassion, taking anger and turning it into clarity. Tantra, in his view, was the most psychological of all paths. It accepted humans in their totality and turned their contradictions into spiritual growth. 4. Osho and Sufism, the path of love and ecstasy. If Zen is silence, and Tao is flow, and Tantra is acceptance, then Sufism is love. Intense, burning, ecstatic, irrational, heart-shattering love. Sufi mystics like Rumi, Attar, Shams Tabrizi, and Mansur al-Hallaj were drunk on divine love. Osho said, "A Sufi does not believe in God. A Sufi dissolves in God." He spoke of Sufis with deep affection. Their poetry, their dancing, their music, their longing, their madness, their joy, their tears. He said Sufism was the most beautiful flowering of the Islamic tradition. Whirling as meditation, Osho introduced Sufi whirling, the spinning practice made famous by Rumi's dervishes. He explained, When the dancer disappears and only the dance remains, God is found. Whirling creates a powerful inner silence through complete physical movement. It is meditation through ecstasy. It is prayer through dance. It is love expressed in motion. Osho used whirling meditation to awaken people to their hearts. The courage of Mansoor Osho admired Mansur al-Hallaj, the Sufi mystic executed for saying, "An al-Haq, I am the truth." He said, when Mansoor spoke, he did not speak as a person. Existence spoke through him. He saw Sufism as the most passionate, most dangerous, most intense path. A path where the heart burns so brightly that only God remains. Osho's universal spirituality. Osho used these traditions not to teach doctrine, but to awaken people. He did not want Buddhists to become Taoists. He did not want Hindus to become Sufis. He did not want Christians to become Tantrics. He wanted everyone to become themselves. He said, "I teach you not a religion, but religiousness. Not a path, but the freedom to explore every path. Not a belief, but an experience. Not a system, but a sensitivity." He created a spirituality that was universal, existential, awake, alive, joyful, rebellious, meditative, celebratory, fluid, creative, a spirituality that did not divide but united. A spirituality that did not imprison but liberated. A spirituality that was as vast as the open sky. The silence of his final years. By the mid-1980s, Osho's body had become frail. The trauma of imprisonment, poisoning allegations, constant travel, and chronic illness weakened him. Yet his presence became more powerful, more silent, more luminous. His discourses transformed, softer, slower, deeper, more spacious, more poetic. He no longer wanted to build communes. He no longer wanted to challenge society. He simply wanted to guide individuals toward inner awakening. This was the beginning of his last phase, the phase of pure wisdom, pure silence, pure meditation. His final teachings were like the quiet glow of sunset after a long, blazing day. They contained the essence of his entire journey. And the world was about to witness his final message. Part 12. The Last Silence. Osho's final teachings, his death, and his immortal legacy. The final years of Osho's life were unlike anything that came before them. After the fire, quiet. After the rebellion, silence. After the storm, a sky without clouds. It was as though he had poured all his energy into awakening a sleeping world, challenging every institution, facing every resistance, breaking every boundary. And now, in these last years, he wanted only one thing: to rest in his own being and to help others enter theirs. His voice softened, his presence deepened, his words became fewer, but each word carried a weight, a stillness, a fragrance of the beyond. His communes were gone. His followers were scattered. His body was weak. His breath often strained. Yet his eyes became like deep lakes of silence, holding a strange combination of sadness, love, mischief, and eternity. It was clear to everyone who sat before him, he was preparing to leave. The body fades, the presence intensifies. After returning to Pune, Osho began giving discourses again, not to large crowds as before, but to intimate gatherings inside the Buddha Hall. His body was frail. He often needed assistance while walking. He sometimes paused mid-sentence as waves of exhaustion passed through him. His heart struggled, his spine weakened, his breathing shortened. His immune system was fragile after years of imprisonment, travel, and suspected poisoning. Yet his presence grew more intense. Disciples felt a strange energy around him. Some described it as liquid silence, some as a calm storm, some as being pulled into a black hole of consciousness, some as being embraced by something infinite. Even skeptics felt something. They could not name it, but they sensed a depth around him that defied psychology and science. He said very little about his illness, not because he wanted secrecy, but because he had no interest in the body. He said, "This body is tired. It has served its purpose. Now it wishes to rest." And then, almost whispering, "But I am not tired." The last teachings, a distillation of a lifetime. His late teachings were like distilled nectar, the pure essence of decades of insight, cut free from controversy, cut free from ambition, cut free from confrontation. They were soft, gentle, like evening light. Yet beneath the softness was the sharp clarity he had always carried. 1. Meditation is enough. He said again and again, "Do not follow me. Do not create a religion out of my words. Just meditate." He didn't want temples. He didn't want institutions. He didn't want organizations. He didn't want structure. He wanted individuals, free, conscious, awake. He said, "A single moment of awareness is worth more than all your scriptures." 2. Love without possession. In his final months, he spoke often of love. He said, "If you love me, do not cling to me. Love me the way the breeze loves the flowers. It touches and moves on." He wanted his disciples to love without dependence. 3. Death is not to be feared. He reminded them, "When I am dying, celebrate, sing, dance, spread flowers." He said death was just a door, just a movement, just a transition. He said, "Do not be sad for me. I am going nowhere. I will remain in your silence." 4. Presence over philosophy. His final discourses were not intellectual. They were not analytical. They were not historical. They were presence, as if he was speaking half from this world and half from the next. He spoke with pauses longer than sentences. Sometimes entire minutes passed in silence, while thousands sat before him without moving. Those pauses spoke more than words. They were transmissions, energetic bridges between his consciousness and theirs. The final months, a slow fading. The end approached slowly. His body became thinner. His hands shook. His walk was unsteady. He often sat down abruptly, as though the body had suddenly lost power. Disciples around him reported moments of intense stillness, as if time had stopped. During meditations, his presence would suddenly disappear like a candle flame, extinguished by a silent wind. Then slowly, he would return. He said, "I am slipping out of this body like a snake leaves its old skin." For him, death was not tragedy. It was liberation. The last night, on January 19, 1990, Osho's breath became shallow. His pulse weakened. He asked for his physician. He asked for his close disciples. He said, "My work is complete." Those were among his last spoken words. He lay quietly on his bed, his eyes half closed, his fingers soft and relaxed, his breathing faint. He closed his eyes fully and withdrew into silence. There was no struggle, no fear, no tension, just a soft exhalation and then stillness. His disciples sat around him. Some cried quietly, some meditated, some held hands. But there was no panic, no chaos, just a deep, deep peace. The room felt full with something invisible yet overwhelmingly present. Some said they felt the entire room fill with a glowing stillness that felt like a blessing. His body stopped, but his presence seemed to expand. The celebration. According to his wishes, there was no mourning, no funeral pyres, no sad processions, no priestly rituals. Instead, music, singing, dancing flowers, meditation. They carried his body through the ashram on white cloth, as disciples showered him with rose petals. People danced and cried simultaneously. People felt his presence more strongly than ever before. His ashes were placed in a marble samadhi memorial. A simple plaque was engraved. Osho, never born, never died, only visited this planet. Between 1931 and 1990, it became one of the most iconic spiritual inscriptions in the world. The legacy begins. Death was not the end of Osho. In many ways, it was the beginning of his true influence. After his departure, his books began spreading globally. His meditation methods entered therapy centers. Spiritual communities across the world adopted his teachings. Universities included him in philosophy and psychology courses. Meditation centers opened in Europe, Russia, Japan, Brazil. And a strange phenomenon occurred. People who had never met him began feeling connected to him. His words carried power. His meditations worked. His vision resonated. His voice became one of the most globally influential spiritual voices in modern history. Why his teachings survived the storm. Osho was not a guru, not a saint, not a philosopher, not a mystic in the traditional sense. He was an alchemist of human consciousness. His teachings survived because they did not rely on belief. They relied on experience. You do not need to believe him to test meditation. You do not need to accept his philosophy to feel silence. You do not need to join a religion to awaken awareness. His teachings are verifiable, testable, immediate. This is why they remain. What he ultimately taught. If one were to distill all of his millions of spoken words into a single essence, it would be this: be aware, be free, be yourself. Awareness, to see clearly. Freedom, to live authentically. Yourself, to bloom into your own uniqueness. He said, "You are not here to imitate Buddha. You are here to become yourself." This was his ultimate message. The silence after him. In the years after his death, disciples often reported feeling his presence in meditation. Some described it as a cool breeze, a soft warmth, a sense of being watched lovingly, a deepening silence, a sudden expansion of awareness. Whether literal or psychological, the effect was real. His energy did not vanish with the body. It diffused into the people who carried his teachings, into every meditator who sat in silence, into every seeker touched by his words, into every heart opened by his presence. Osho's place in history. Historians still struggle to categorize him. He was too mystical for academia, too intellectual for mystics, too rebellious for religion, too loving for politics, too scientific for spiritualists, too spiritual for scientists, too modern for the East, too ancient for the West. He fits nowhere and everywhere. Like Buddha, he lived outside systems. Like Lao Tzu, he remained unpredictable. Like Jesus, he challenged power. Like Rumi, he dissolved boundaries. Like Socrates, he provoked the world into questioning itself. He was a phenomenon that cannot be contained in biography. His true legacy is not his life, but the inner transformation he sparked in millions. A final meditation. A soft ending. Imagine now, as this long story closes, that you are sitting with him in his last days. The hall is dim. Incense smoke drifts in thin lines. The air is warm. People breathe quietly. Outside, the night is still. He sits before you. White robe, long beard, eyes half closed. body fragile, presence immense. He speaks slowly, his voice soft, like wind passing through leaves. Remember, your life is a gift. Do not waste it in fear. Do not waste it in imitation. Close your eyes, feel your breath, let silence bloom. And then, live. Live totally. Live joyfully. Live consciously. That is all I ask. He raises his eyes and looks into yours. It feels like he sees everything. Your past, your wounds, your hopes, your unspoken fears, your hidden light. And then, with that gentle smile only he had, he whispers, "You are already complete. Just remember." The hall fades. The incense fades. His image fades. But the silence remains. A silence that is no longer his, but yours. A silence you carry with you into the night.